Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Alam niyo, meron tayong tinatawag na reality check. Bago tayo lumabas ng bahay, titingnan muna natin ang langit kung uulan. At pagka medyo madilim, kulimlim, magdadala tayo ng payong o kapote. That's reality check. But there is something like wishful thinking, opposite side of reality thinking. Wishful thinking, statistics, the gross domestic product. So it is reported that the GDP of the Philippine economy grew in the first quarter of this year. And why not? The elections brought out all the money. And therefore, all the money that went around the whole country is, they all add up and they become GDP. But the real GDP, the statistics is not the issue. The picture that is on the reality on the ground is what matters. And the reality is that millions of us have Lucky Me for breakfast, Lucky Me for lunch, and more of Lucky Me noodles for dinner. And that means there is a gap between the GDP, the wishful reality, wishful thinking, versus the reality on the ground. Reality, you want to buy a new car, but then when you check your bank account, there is not enough for you to be able to manage the monthly amortization. That's reality thinking. Wishful thinking, the world wants infinite growth. They have all sorts of things, inclusive growth, infinite growth. And yet the reality is that we are using up the resources of 1.5 planets. And we have only one planet, Earth. That is our only home. I talk about reality because all three readings today speak tangentially about reality. First, reality check, Isaiah. I come to gather nations of every language. This is reality. The Lord loves us. The Lord wills the salvation of all. The Lord wants to gather everybody like a hen would gather her chicks under her wings. I've come to gather nations of every language. This is the first reality check that I'd like you to have. But there is a second reality check that doesn't quite square with it, doesn't quite jibe with it. It seems to cancel out the first reality. And it talks about in the letter to the Hebrews, do not disdain the discipline of the Lord. Whom the Lord loves, He disciplines. Talking about discipline, the word discipline actually has nothing to do with what we think it means. It is connected with being a learner. Disco means to learn, and that's the root word of a disciple. A disciplined person is first of all one who learns. I'd like to tell you about learning. I've learned a few lessons over the past few years. One, I've learned not to answer phone calls from numbers I do not know, because 90% of them are scammers, and I've been scammed not once, not twice. People who seek for help, people who talk with tears about their children being in the hospital, and when I ask them about where is the hospital, and they tell me, I find nobody. But I've given them, because they badger me day and night. I cannot sleep. Reality, discipline, learning. When I was in Mandaluyong, the headhunters would come to my office looking for potential people to be employed. And you know what? They kept on telling me, Father, we have started moving away from graduates of expensive schools. I don't need to mention them, you know them. Why? Because they have an asking price. They want the salary of a manager because they are graduates of very expensive schools. And so they prefer to get the graduates of the state universities from rural areas because they have no sense of self-entitlement. They just all have the desire to help their families. to get a little of what the economy would allow them to get so that they can help their younger brothers and sisters also finish schooling. And yet the graduates of our expensive schools, they are all spoiled brats. They want to be managers on the first day of work. Reality in the world. This is the reality that perhaps we need to check in on. Students who all want high marks. I've been teaching for 45 years, so I think I should know what I'm talking about. Students who never submit anything but they want to pass. Students who don't participate in class but they want summa cum laude or magna cum laude. Students who think they know because they have read the headline in Mr. Google's report or got the data from Facebook University and they want full marks. Reality. Today, the gospel talks about reality. An anonymous person, the Lord was passing through towns and villages. Take note, it's not an R&R. The Lord was journeying not because He was on an excursion. The Lord was journeying through towns and villages teaching. He has work to do. He went and making His way to Jerusalem, and here was one who came with an impertinent statistical question. Lord, will only a few people be saved? The Lord has no patience for impertinent questions. A question of quantitative realities, a question of numbers, a question of mathematical certainty. That is not a mathematical reality that we should ask, but the Lord asks us for the right desire. Our opening prayer talked about, may we love what you command and desire what you promise. The statistical question, will only a few people be saved? That was a factual question. He wanted facts, but the Lord was pointing to a desire that is right there sitting in the hearts of each and every one of us. Strive to enter through the narrow gate. For many, I tell you, will attempt to enter but will not be strong enough. And therefore, the question for us today, let us not get lost in statistics. Let us not get lost and be proud of our GDP. It became high because of the elections. Let us not be proud because we have the dream or the desire or the wish of infinite growth, inclusive growth, enlightened self-entitlement. These are beautiful words that people who are out to grab your money always talk about. Enlightened self-entitlement. In other words, pagka nagkaroon ng self-entitlement na matalino, anong labas ng buwakaw? Naisahan ka. It's enlightened self-entitlement. Today, the Lord tells us one thing. Hey, disciple, your question is off tangent. It is not about the numbers, it's about the desire. What do you desire? What is your desire? The known disciple thought that the number issue was what mattered most. But what mattered most was the question that he should have asked, how do I get through the narrow door? There is no such thing as a free lunch. So, if the first reading from Isaiah tells us the Lord wants us all to be saved, the church is not here comes everybody, but the church is welcome to everybody. Not here comes everybody without effort. You're not even dressed properly. You're not behaving in accordance with your desire. And therefore, let us learn from the disciple who were perpetual learners. And because they were learners, then they were followers. And because they were followers, then they cultivated discipline, the discipline of those who wanted to know the truth, the discipline of those who are always looking for salvific truth. It is not about how many will enter heaven, but how do we get to heaven. No such thing as a free lunch. People who are self-entitled think they are entitled to anything. And one of the saddest things I experience, because I've been helping every time there is a typhoon or a catastrophe, I have sent scores of boats to several places, fishermen's boats. I just came from Maasin, and I'm still reeling under the very beautiful experience and impressions I had. We Filipinos don't care too much about Mary as queen. We have no queens. We have no relationship with queens. But when we talk about mahal nga patrona, madre, nanay, inay, then all our heart is all agog for a woman above all women, blessed among all women, who is relational, who cares for us, who treats us as her own sons and daughters. Why am I impressed by the people in Southern Leyte? The masses every Sunday were starting at 5 a.m. all the way up to 11 on the hour by the hour. And then 2 p.m. up to 7 p.m. on the hour by the hour. And all of them are overflowing. The cathedral cannot contain even the cathedral grounds. They extended all the way up to the plaza. And every time the Mass ended, scores of them would fall in line to go to their mahal nga patrona, the Virgen de la Asunción, and just touch the glass that enclosed, because that statue was stolen, or they attempted to steal it, but they found out that they couldn't carry it. The thieves couldn't carry it because it became heavy. And yet they are able to transport it when they are not stealing it. And it has happened several times. The roof of the cathedral were all blown away. The roof of the convent were also blown away. All the surrounding areas were all destroyed. But the statue of the Virgen de la Asunción was untouched during Agaton and Odette. How do you explain this? You cannot answer this with statistical figures. You have to answer it with the desire of faith, the language of faith. And this is now my point, and I'll end with this idea. Reality number one, the Lord wills all of us to be saved. Reality number two, we need to move our asses and work for it. We need to merit and work for it. St. Paul says, I work for my salvation with fear and trembling. We are not self-entitled spoiled brats who demand the salary of a manager upon graduation from that school in Loyola Heights or in Taft Avenue for that matter. This is a problem with the classic theology of divine agency and human cooperation. And there are so many faulty theologies around. I heard this so often in Maasin. Simplistic theological statements like God will provide. God will provide. But you know very well that what money I brought came from some of you here and from my students in Makati, in Mandaluyong, and in Canlubang. In other words, somebody had to work for it. God's providence makes use of you and me, human agency. And therefore, the desire for salvation has to be met up with a desire for discipline to do what we can. Divine agency and human cooperation. One of my idol writers, and I stop here, I've gotten beyond my allowed 10 few responsible minutes. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote about cheap grace and costly grace. Cheap grace is when you're looking for fun, frolic, fantasy, and partying. Another Protestant writer talks about these people as fair-weather Christians. But we have to desire for costly grace, the grace that saves, the grace that brings salvation, the grace that means we need to stop now and do our work. God bless us all.